Part 19. The Prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 181. Shen Shuwei was unhappy when he heard this. Was he deliberately calling her a pig? She retorted, "How can I eat 6 bowls of rice? The baby doesn't need to eat." "Really?" Xiao Jinyan chuckled, "how many bowls do you want to eat?" "Of course 4 bowls of rice," Shen Shuwei said with absolute certainty. Xiao Jinyan's eyes lingered on Shen Shuwei. When he held her in his arms last night, he could clearly feel that she was very thin, but her body was very soft. It felt like holding cotton, with a sweet fragrance. If it were fatter, it would be softer. "You don't need to lose weight. It would be better if you gain weight." Shen Shuwei was gossiping while eating braised pork. "Does your highness like voluptuous women?" Xiao Jinyan nodded. He likes Shen Chu to be a little fatter and the flesh on his waist will be softer. Shen Shuwei seemed to have discovered some breaking news. Xiao Jinyan liked voluptuous girls, but all the women in the East Palace were trying to lose weight and not eat meat in order to maintain their figure. "Then why didn't your highness tell them?" "In order to lose weight, they rarely eat meat." Xiao Jinyan frowned. "Who?" Shen Shuwei ate chicken feet. "Those women of yours, they lose weight every day. Don't you like those who are too thin?" Xiao Jinyan knew that she couldn't say the words he wanted to hear. "Why should I tell them? What does their fatness have to do with me? They are your women, and they are related to your hand feel." Shen Chu slightly saw that Xiao Jinyan was unhappy, so he didn't say anything more. He clenched his chopsticks and gave him a piece of braised pork. He smiled to please him and said, "Your highness, eat meat." Yes. Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and looked at the meat in the bowl, picked it up and put it in his mouth. It didn't seem that greasy. After Shen Shuwei had eaten and drank enough, she felt her belly and didn't want to move anymore. She glanced at Xiao Jinyan who was drinking tea. Was he planning to stay overnight? "She is sick now," and Xiao Jinyan said that he would not let her sleep while sick. Fortunately, Xiao Jinyan did not stay overnight and left Hehuan Hall after saying a few words. Xiao Jinyan returned to the study and when Weiki asked, "How was the interrogation?" Wei Qi said, "Go back to the master, Feng Zhaoshun still refuses to speak." Xiao Jinyan was already a little impatient. Shen Shuwei's lethargy was getting worse and worse, and he couldn't wait any longer. Torture her to extract a confession. Make sure she tells you where the things are. Follow your orders. Wei Qi took the order and exited. As soon as he entered the interrogation room, the guard ran out in a hurry. When he saw him, he said, Guard, it's bad, Feng Zhaoshun committed suicide." "What?" Wei Kai's eyes widened and he strode in. He saw Feng Zhaoshun lying on the ground. The woman's forehead was covered in blood. She had obviously hit the wall and died. "It's over." Wei Qi wanted to curse in anger. "Before you die, tell me where you hid the things. Master still remembers to ask for them." Not long after, Xiao Jinyan saw Wei Qi leaving and returning. "Did she do it?" Wei Qi knelt on one knee and clasped his fists with both hands. "Master, Feng Zhaoshun committed suicide." "Suicide?" Xiao Jinyan clenched her fists and was so angry. "How did you look at her?" Wei Qi lowered his head. "This subordinate is incompetent, please punish me, master." Xiao Jinyan knew that it was too late to say anything now. Now that Feng Zhaoshun was dead, no one knew where the harmful thing was. It was related to Shen Shuwei's safety, and Xiao Jinyan couldn't sit still. "Send more people to search Xiaoxiang Pavilion and dig 3 feet into the ground to find things." "I obey my orders." Wei Qi stood up and strode out. Xiao Jinyan then also went to Xiaoxiang Pavilion. After searching all night with no results, Xiao Jinyan sent someone to bring Lu Zayan over. Lu Zayan stayed up all night last night to calculate his fortune, but as soon as he lay down, without even closing his eyes, Wei Qi pulled him up from the bed. "Brother Wei, what are you doing?" Lu Zhayan was only wearing a middle coat. He was a weak scholar, so he was dragged out by Wei Qi. He didn't want to lose face. The maid had already hidden away. Wei Qi didn't realize how rude his actions were. He picked up the clothes on the side and put them on Lu Zhayan casually. "Master Lu, the master wants you to come over now." Lu Zhayan felt a little aggrieved. "I didn't sleep all night last night." Wei Qi paused and said, "Sleep when you get back." What else could Lu Zhayan say? After getting dressed with Wei Kai's help, he couldn't help but praise, "Brother Wei, although he is a man, he is very good at dressing people." Wei Qi was also polite, "Thank you for the compliment." The two of them came to Xiaoxiang Pavilion one after another, and there were 10 guards standing inside, rummaging around. Lu Zhayan calculated for a long time, raised his head and looked at Xiao Jinyan and said, "Your Highness, according to Wei Chen's calculation, that thing should be in the yard." Xiao Jinyan glanced at the overgrown yard and said coldly, "Look." Finally, before dark, the guards found the thing in the lotus pond. The thing was contained in a wine jar. After Lu Zhayan opened it, he took out a doll with Shen Liangdi's birth date written on it. Xiao Jinyan saw 3 steel needles inserted into the doll, complicated runes written on its belly, and angry flames dancing in its eyes. How to solve this? Lu Zhayan looked at it for a long time, but couldn't think of an effective way. Wei Chen will take it back and study it. The rest was handed over to Lu Zhayan, and Xiao Jinyan went to Hehuan Hall. Shen Chuwei had just finished dinner and was lying on the couch like salted fish. Just when Shen Chuwei was lying down and feeling drowsy, she vaguely saw a figure walking towards her. The figure was getting closer and closer, and the familiar cold fragrance penetrated the tip of her nose. She subconsciously shouted, "Your Highness." Xiao Jinyan bent over and leaned forward, but before he stretched out his arms, he heard Shen Chuwei calling him. Her voice was soft and unusually pleasant. "Why don't you go to bed if you want to sleep?" Shen Chuwei said listlessly, "I just want to lie down for a while to digest my food." "How can I digest my food while lying down?" Xiao Jinyan shook his head helplessly, stretched out his arms and picked up the person on the couch horizontally. He could easily hold the person who was light in weight without any effort. Shen Chuwei became much more awake at once. From this angle, he could clearly see his handsome profile, with narrow eyebrows, a high nose bridge, and perfect 3-dimensional facial features. As expected, handsome people are very pleasing to the eye no matter how you look at them. When they reached the bedside, Shen Chuwei was laid flat on the bed by Xiao Jinyan, and then he saw his hand come to her side, trying to untie her waist belt. She instinctively pressed the hand, and her clear starry eyes looked at him in confusion. "Your Highness." Xiao Jinyan looked at the hand that was pressing on her, raised his phoenix eyes and looked at her, and said something serious, "You have undressed me many times, this time, I will also undress you." Shen Chuwei grabbed his hand and struggled to sit up. "How dare I trouble your Highness, I can do it myself." "It's okay." Xiao Jinyan's hand reached to her waist, grabbed the laces, pulled hard, and the waist belt loosened, and it was easily taken off. Shen Chuwei watched Xiao Jinyan's hand come to her waist again, and it was too late to stop it. She felt the collar loosen and the belt was untied. "Good night, my dears. I'm adjusting my state these days and trying to update more. I'm acting cute and asking for monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 182. Chapter 182, a little unfamiliar for the first time. This was not the first time that Xiao Jinyan undressed her. Back then, during the autumn examination, Chengzi was not around, and Xiao Jinyan took the initiative to change the dressing for her. Now he took the initiative to undress her, and the atmosphere was a little strange. Xiao Jinyan had never helped a woman undress before, and this time he suddenly felt like it. Originally, he just wanted to undress her so that she could sleep more comfortably. Now he had other thoughts. While he was untying her belt, he was observing her reaction, and her cheeks were obviously flushed, which was only when a little girl was shy. He continued to take off her dress, and women's clothes were more complicated than men's. It was inevitable that he was a little unfamiliar for the first time. Shen Shuwei always felt that Xiao Jinyan was doing it on purpose, and it was so slow that he was not taking off his clothes at all. "Your Highness, I will do it myself." As he said that, he took off the rest of his clothes neatly, and then lifted the quilt and got in. Although there is a saying that you can't avoid the 15th day, it's a matter of time. Xiao Jinyan looked at her shy behavior, not annoyed but felt a little cute, but the rare opportunity to practice was gone. Women's clothes are indeed a bit troublesome. Xiao Jinyan joked, "You are so shy now, how shy will you be when the time comes?" Shen Shuwei looked at Xiao Jinyan with a cold face and said such seductive words, "Isn't it time yet? Turn off the lights when the time comes." Xiao Jinyan understood it literally, that is, if you can't see, you won't be shy. Shen Shuwei looked at the postures of the two. Xiao Jinyan's hands were on her side, leaning over to look at her. She yawned and asked, "Your Highness, have you found the things?" "Found it." Lu Zhayan took it back for research, "and it should be possible to break the curse soon. You don't have to worry. Only by removing the curse can you really feel at ease." How could such a vicious witchcraft suddenly appear in the palace? Feng Zhaoshun is just an ordinary woman, and her family background is simple, too suspicious. Shen Shuwei saw the tiredness between Xiao Jinyan's eyebrows and thought that he must not have rested well in the past 2 days. "Your Highness has been tired for me these 2 days, so rest early." Xiao Jinyan pinched her eyebrows. "Well, I'll go take a bath after that." She stood up and went to take a bath behind the screen. Xiao Jinyan had finished bathing and came to the bed in a single piece of clothing. She lowered her eyes and glanced at the person who had fallen asleep. He lifted the quilt and lay beside her, then turned sideways and stared at her sleeping face for a while. His eyes fell on her lips and he couldn't help but lean in and kiss her. Shen Shuwei, who was originally drowsy, woke up a little because of this kiss. Fortunately, it was a light kiss, and he left before she opened her eyes. Some were shocked that the cold prince would secretly kiss a girl. She simply pretended to be asleep and didn't know what was going on. Xiao Jinyan lay down again. These days, he was really busy and only worked for 2 hours a day. Even an Iron Man couldn't stand it. The next day, when Xiao Jinyan woke up, he found Shen Shuwei lying flat, not like she usually slept. He knew it was because of the witchcraft, and it would be dangerous if she continued to sleep like this. Lu Zhayan spent the whole day studying the puppet. There were 2 steel needles on the forehead and 2 on the chest, and he didn't dare to pull them out casually. When Xiao Jinyan came, he saw Lu Zhayan studying the puppet. "Haven't you found a way to remove it yet?" Lu Zhayan said, "Your Highness, no, this witchcraft is a curse with resentment, which is difficult to remove. It also shows that the person who created the curse has a deep hatred for Shen Liangdi." Xiao Jinyan said, "Shen Liangdi did not provoke Feng Zhaoshun, but I just couldn't stand it and punished her." Lu Zhayan pointed to the talisman on her belly and said, "Shen Liangdi has a false pregnancy pulse because of this talisman. This talisman is easy to remove, but the steel needle on the puppet is not easy to pull out, for fear of backlash." Xiao Jinyan frowned when he heard it. "Then you should think of a way quickly." "I am thinking about it." Lu Zhayan flipped through the book left by his master and read it carefully. Xiao Jinyan paced back and forth in the study anxiously. Feng Zhaoshun died suddenly, Xiaoxiang Pavilion was sealed, and His Highness went to Hehuan Palace every day. People in the East Palace had already started to talk about it. Concubine Su went to Hehuan Palace twice but was turned away, so she had to go back home. On the way back, I met Tao Chenjui. Tao Chenjui stepped forward and bowed, with a faint smile on his lips. Where did Concubine Su come from? Concubine Su was a little puzzled. I went to the Hehuan Palace, but unfortunately I couldn't get in. I heard that Shen Liangdi was critically ill, but I don't know if it's true or not. These are just rumors. Tao Chenjui sighed. I haven't seen Shen Liangdi for a few days, and I don't know how she is. There are a lot of rumors in the East Palace these days. At first, it was said that Shen Liangdi had an affair with the guards, and now it is said that Shen Liangdi will not live long. I don't know why they are so mean. Concubine Su said angrily as he spoke. He looked like he was going to slap those people in the face. And that Feng Zhaoshun, I used to dislike her, but I didn't expect her true nature to be exposed so quickly. It's a pity that she overestimated her own abilities. That's how it is in the palace. To win favor, people will do anything. Fortunately, Feng Zhaoshun's scheme didn't succeed. Tao Chenjui paused and continued, Your Highness takes imperial physician went to Hehuan Palace every day. I don't know what's going on with Concubine Shen. Concubine Chang passed by Yuxiang Palace and stopped when she heard someone talking. She heard this conversation and a smug smile appeared on the corner of her lips. Shen Liangdi has been ignored by His Highness for many days, and she has used her seductive tricks to gain favor. If she continues to persuade him, her position as crown princess will be unstable. Now it seems that Shen Liangdi is probably done for, as she has lost a strong competitor. Chang Liangdi turned to Huaixiang and said, Go back. Huaixiang followed in small steps, My lady, Shen Liangdi has been competing for your favor everywhere, and now she will suffer the consequences. Be careful with your words, Chang Liangdi scolded. She had suffered a loss once, but fortunately her aunt didn't hear anything, otherwise it would be over. Huaixiang lowered her eyes and replied, I know. Chang Liangdi ordered, Prepare some delicious snacks. I'm going to Hehuan Palace. Huaixiang asked in confusion, My lady, Shen Liangdi is almost dying, why are you still going? Chang Liangdi raised the corner of her lips, Doesn't your highness go to Hehuan Palace every day? Then I'll go and pretend to give your highness a good impression. Huaixiang suddenly realized, I'll prepare it right away. Huaixiang prepared 3 delicious snacks and went to Hehuan Palace with Chang Liangdi. The little rabbit had been guarding the door. When she saw Chang Liangdi coming, she stepped forward to stop her. Chang Liangdi, Shen Liangdi is not feeling well and is not suitable to see guests. Chang Liangdi said gently, I'll come to see her and leave. It won't take up time. The little rabbit saw Xiao Jinyan coming and knelt down to salute, Your Highness. Chang Liangdi turned around and saw Xiao Jinyu standing behind her. She bowed, Your Highness, may you be blessed with good health. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 183. Xiao Jinyan said in a faint voice, What are you doing here? Chang Liangdi lowered her eyes and said softly, I heard that Shen Liangdi was not feeling well, so I brought some delicious cakes to visit her. Xiao Jinyan glanced at the food box in Huaixiang's hand, She is not feeling well now, you leave the snacks and go back first. Chang Liangdi replied obediently, Yes, Your Highness. Huaixiang handed the food box in his hand to the little rabbit. After Chang Liangdi and Huaixiang left, Xiao Jinyan strode in and saw Chengzi, and asked, Is she awake? Chengzi said, Your Highness, the young lady has not woken up since last night. Xiao Jinyan frowned and walked in, and saw Shen Chuwei sleeping on the bed, and his brows frowned even tighter. Shen Chuwei had been sleeping for 2 days, and Xiao Jinyan also broke the door of Lu Zaiyan's study. The first thing he said when he entered the room was, Why haven't you figured out a solution yet? Lu Zaiyan was no longer surprised to see Xiao Jinyan suddenly come in, Your Highness, there is a solution, but it's a little inappropriate. Lu Zhiyan was originally the director of the Imperial Observatory, and now he has a part-time job as a national teacher. He was almost exhausted these 2 days. 10 years ago, Daxia had a national teacher, but because the national teacher abused his ability and caused trouble, the position of national teacher has been lost since then. Xiao Jinyan asked, "What solution?" Lu Zhiyan said hesitantly, "We need dragon blood." Dragon blood, as the name suggests, refers to the blood of the true emperor. The emperor is destined by heaven and has the effect of suppressing evil. This. Xiao Jinyan was also in a dilemma. It was impossible to ask the king of a country to donate blood. He looked up at Lu Zhiyan. "Is there no other way? Your Highness is the future crown prince and the future ruler of a country. You can try using your Highness's blood." Xiao Jinyan heard this without hesitation and ordered, "Bring the knife and bowl." Lu Zhiyan was stunned for a moment. Xiao Jinyan agreed too readily. Because of a concubine, it was the first time he saw Xiao Jinyan care so much about a woman. It was strange. Wei Qi hesitated for a while, followed the order and went out to get the knife and bowl. Wei Qi has always been very efficient. After a while, he got the knife and bowl and presented them with both hands. Xiao Jinyan rolled up his sleeves, revealing a white wrist. After aiming at the mouth of the bowl, he picked up the dagger and cut his wrist without hesitation. The bright red blood flowed out instantly and dripped into the celadone bowl. Wei Kai's eyes widened when he saw it, as if he couldn't believe it. Lu Zhiyan was also stunned. His Highness was so brave. When he reacted, Lu Zhiyan saw half a bowl of blood and hurriedly shouted, "Your Highness, enough is enough." Xiao Jinyan had no intention of stopping, and looked up at Lu Zhiyan. "Are you sure it's enough?" Lu Zhiyan was so scared by this half bowl of blood. "Enough, Your Highness." Xiao Jinyan stopped. Wei Qi handed over a towel, pressed the bleeding wound, and then took out the hemostatic medicine from his sleeve pocket and sprinkled it on the wound. Wei Qi was a guard who protected Xiao Jinyan's safety closely. He encountered many injuries of all sizes. Such knife wounds were easy to deal with and handy. It didn't take long to bandage the wound. Lu Zhiyan also took the blood to make talisman water and remove the curse. It seems simple, but it is actually very troublesome to operate. Xiao Jinyan stood aside and watched. Finally, after an hour, Lu Zhiyan made a satisfactory talisman water. He put the puppet into the water. The talisman on the puppet's belly disappeared at an obvious speed. Seeing that the time was almost right, Lu Zhiyan carefully pulled out the needles. Xiao Jinyan couldn't help but get a little nervous watching the scene. The 3 needles could kill Shen Chuwei at any time. When all 3 were pulled out, Lu Zhiyan secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Xiao Jinyan asked, "Is everything okay?" Lu Zhiyan said, "It depends on Shen Liangdi's physical condition. It shouldn't be a big problem." Xiao Jinyan turned around and walked out. Wei Qi wanted to follow him, but Lu Zhiyan grabbed his sleeve and said gossipingly, "Your Highness, are you attracted to Shen Liangdi?" "How do I know? Wei Qi is a straight man, how can he understand the love between men and women?" Just as he was about to leave, Lu Zhiyan pressed his shoulder again and continued gossiping. "Didn't you see that your Highness didn't hesitate when he cut his wrist? If it was another woman, do you think your Highness would do the same?" Wei Qi thought about it, then shook his head. "That's not right. Your Highness must be moved." "It's rare." Lu Zhiyan smiled like an old mother. Wei Qi couldn't help but retort, "What's rare? Shen Liangdi risked her life to save my master. My master is not a heartless person." Lu Zhiyan looked at Wei Qi with his warm eyes. "I'll give you a word." Wei Qi looked curious. "What?" Lu Zhiyan said in a gentle voice, "You deserve to be single." Wei Qi. Asterisk. Chengzi saw the prince and hurriedly put down the work in her hands and saluted, "Your Highness, I wish you good health." Xiao Jinyan asked, "Is she awake?" Chengzi replied, "I just went to check, and the young lady is not awake. Xiao Jinyan walked in after hearing this. Outside the window, the spring breeze was blowing. The room was quiet. Xiao Jinyan slowed down his pace after walking in, came to the bed, lowered his eyes and looked at the person on the bed, not knowing whether he was unconscious or really asleep. He sat down on the bed, stared at her sleeping face for a while, reached out and pushed her arm, and called out, "Xiaju, wake up." Shen Shuwei said opened her sleepy eyes, and saw Xiao Jinyan sitting beside her. She muttered, "Your Highness, why don't you sleep?" She slept for too long, and her brain was a little slow. Xiao Jinyan knew she was confused when he saw her like this, and it was still broad daylight. "You have slept for 2 days, and it is afternoon now." Shen Shuwei heard that the room was bright, obviously it was broad daylight, and she was confused just now. She thought of sleeping for 2 days, and felt a little regretful. Then didn't I miss 6 meals? Xiao Jinyan, why did you only remember to eat? After a while, Shen Shuwei smiled optimistically again. "It doesn't matter, it's just 6 meals, I can make up for it later." Xiao Jinyan, "It doesn't matter if you eat more." Shen Shuwei chuckled twice. Being able to eat is a blessing. Sleeping for too long, the waist is a little sore. Shen Shuwei stretched lazily, revealing a lotus root powder belly band that could not cover her fair waist. Xiao Jinyan looked over and landed on that slender waist. Her skin was whiter than snow, without a trace of fat. Shen Shuwei paused, and looked down along Xiao Jinyan's line of sight, and saw that part of her waist was exposed. She quickly lowered her arms and covered her waist. "Your Highness, don't look." Xiao Jinyan retracted his gaze and looked at Shen Shuwei, with a faint smile on his lips. "You belong to me, why can't I look at you? The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 184. Shen Shuwei was speechless for a moment. The entire East Palace belongs to Xiao Jinyan, so what's the big deal about looking at a concubine's waist? Although it's true, it's another matter when it happens to me. Xiao Jinyan asked, "Are you hungry?" Hungry? Shen Shuwei touched her empty stomach and said, "I haven't eaten 6 meals, how can I not be hungry?" Xiao Jinyan ordered, "Chengzi, prepare the food." "I'll prepare it right away." Chengzi ran into the small kitchen, and with Gaixiang little rabbit helping her, a sumptuous meal was ready soon. Shen Shuwei looked at the 3 dishes and 1 soup in front of her, smelled the fragrance of the food, and felt even hungrier. She picked up the chopsticks and was about to start eating, raised her eyes to look at Xiao Jinyan sitting opposite, and asked in confusion, "Your Highness, don't you want to eat?" "Xiao Jinyan, I've already had lunch." "Then I'll eat." Shen Shuwei couldn't wait to eat the braised pork ribs, and ate them with fragrant rice, which was particularly delicious. As long as it's braised, she loves it. Xiao Jinyan drank tea leisurely, watching Shen Shuwei eating. Somehow, the more he watched, the more he felt pleased. Xiao Jinyan put down the teacup. Lu Zhan has found a way to lift the curse, and it has just been lifted. Lord Lu is so amazing, he can read palms and lift curses. Shen Shuwei admired him. Xiao Jinyan paused, and his voice sank, "When did you become so sweet?" Shen Shuwei was not modest, born. "Xiao Jinyan, how do you know he is so amazing?" Shen Shuwei said, "I asked her to read my palms, and she was very accurate." Xiao Jinyan became interested. "What did he say?" "He said that my fate was rough, and I had to experience such a miserable fate at a young age, but Lord Lu said that I am also a blessed person, and I will not have to worry about food and clothing in the future." Shen Shuwei did not tell the truth. She came from the modern era. If Xiao Jinyan knew about it, wouldn't he think she was possessed by a ghost and ask a Taoist priest to perform a ritual to eliminate her? Xiao Jinyan nodded in agreement. Only after death can one be resurrected through a corpse. It can be considered a rough fate. It is true that he is a blessed person. With him, he has no worries about food and drink. Didn't say anything else. Shen Shuwei paused chewing and shook her head. It was a bit strange. Lord Lu liked to tell people's marriages. How could he not tell Shen Shuwei's? Although Xiao Jinyan was curious, he didn't ask, "Are you feeling unwell?" Shen Shuwei felt it for a while. Although she would feel backache after sleeping too long, she felt nothing after eating 2 bowls of rice. She shook her head, "I am not feeling unwell." Xiao Jinyan felt relieved, "That's good." Shen Shuwei rested for 2 days and recovered well. Concubine Su couldn't wait to come to the door. As soon as she entered the Hehuan Palace, before she saw Concubine Su, her voice came first. "Finally, you can come in. You were turned away twice. I suspected that you were isolated." Shen Shuwei asked Chengzi to prepare tea and melon seeds to entertain Concubine Su. Concubine Su didn't mind, she just ate the melon seeds. Shen Shuwei spent most of these days in a deep sleep. If Chengzi hadn't told her, she wouldn't have known that Xiao Jinyan didn't let them come to see her. "I haven't felt well these days, so I've been resting." "That's no wonder, Your Highness is the same. Even if you don't feel well, there's no need to stop you. I don't know what's going on with you. The Eastern Palace is saying that you won't live long." I almost believed it. Concubine Su couldn't help but complain. Shen Shuwei's mouth twitched. "It's only been a few days, and it's been spread like this? It's fine that I can't see Your Highness every day, but I can't even see you. I can't even play landlord with you to kill time." Concubine Su was really frustrated these days, and she complained whenever she got the chance. Shen Shuwei ate melon seeds and listened to Concubine Su's complaints, but she was still confused as to why she couldn't see Your Highness every day. Could it be that the rain and dew weren't evenly spread? Concubine Su was originally bored, so she came to drink tea, crack melon seeds, complained, and left. When Shen Liangyuan was around, she could still say a few words to relieve her boredom, but now that she was locked up in the cold palace, she didn't even have the fun of saying things to others. The news that Shen Shuwei was not only fine, but also in good spirits spread again. "My lady, I heard that Shen Liangdi in Hehuan Palace has completely recovered, and Concubine Su has even gone to visit her," Huaixiang told her master the first time she heard the news. Chang Liangdi paused while drinking tea, and looked up at Huaixiang in disbelief. "Are you sure you heard it right?" "I heard it right, Concubine Su just came out of Hehuan Palace," Huaixiang said with certainty. Chang Liangdi didn't want to drink tea. How could she not be disappointed when her expectations were dashed? Shen Shuwei was so lucky, how could she be saved from danger like this? She held the handkerchief tightly in her hand, thought for a long time, and whispered to Huaixiang, "Go prepare some cakes, and I'll send this letter to my mother, and you can send it out of the palace together." "Yes, I'll prepare it right away." Huaixiang took the order and went to the small kitchen. Huaixiang was very fast, making a plate of pastries and putting it in the food box. Chang Liangdi also wrote a letter, put it in an envelope, and handed it to Huaixiang. "Don't let others see the letter, understand?" "I understand." Huaixiang carried the food box and left Xinlan Palace. Chang Liangdi snorted coldly, "Shen Liangdi, I have the support of the queen and my family. I don't have anything you want. Why do you compete with me for the position of crown princess? Maybe I slept too much in the past few days, and now I am not sleepy at nap time." Shen Shuwei stopped in the corner with her skirt lifted, looking at the gray rabbit. She didn't pay attention to it for a few days and found that it had gained weight again. Originally it was a wild rabbit, it had grown a lot of flesh, and it probably couldn't run fast now. "Tell me the truth, why did you grow so much flesh on your belly? Did you eat more meat for me, your master?" Xiao Jinyan heard this as soon as he came in. He knew that Shen Shuwei had always been thinking about rabbit meat, but he didn't expect that she wanted to eat it now. "This rabbit is only 4 months old, not yet an adult." He looked at the gray rabbit. If it wasn't a wild rabbit, no one would recognize it as a wild rabbit. It was fat and strong, squatting beside the flowers and plants, just a lump, with lazy limbs. The wild rabbits in the royal enclosure have strong limbs and can jump and run. Imperial Dr. Wen poked his head out from behind and took a look at the rabbit. After listening to Shen Liangdi's words, it was really cute. Shen Shuwei poked the rabbit's soft belly, her tone full of threats, "If you don't lose weight, you can only be roasted." Xiao Jinyan coughed lightly, "Shen Liangdi." Shen Shuwei raised her head and saw Xiao Jinyan standing behind her. She lifted her skirt and bowed, "Your Highness." Xiao Jinyan said, "I asked Imperial Dr. Wen to check your pulse and see how your body is recovering." Shen Shuwei was stunned for a moment. She didn't forget what Xiao Jinyan said, that if you recover, you will sleep with her. She just didn't expect Xiao Jinyan to be so anxious and bring Imperial Dr. Wen to check if she is well. "If there is no problem with the examination, does it mean that you will sleep with her? My dears, good night. The updates these days are all at midnight. Being cute and cute to ask for monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 185. A group of people entered the back room. Shen Shuwei sat on the chair, her hands on the examination pad, her sleeves lifted up, revealing a fair and slender wrist. Dr. Wen lowered his eyes and carefully diagnosed the pulse. Xiao Jinyan sat aside, drinking tea and looking at Shen Shuwei from time to time. He was obviously in better spirits these 2 days than the previous 2, and his face was much rosier. When Dr. Wen took back his hand, Xiao Jinyan asked, "How is her recovery going?" Imperial Dr. Wen replied respectfully, "Your Highness, Shen Liangdi is in good health." Of course, Shen Shuwei's body was clear to him, and there was nothing wrong with it. Except for the minor illnesses left by the original owner, he had cured all of them. Xiao Jinyan asked worriedly, "She has been in a coma for such a long time recently. Is there any other problem?" Dr. Wen paused after hearing this. He glanced sideways at Shen Shuwei and said, "Your Highness, Shen Liangdi's appetite has suddenly increased. I'm afraid it's inappropriate. I suggest you eat less." Shen Shuwei. Good guy, you even have to control how much food she eats. If she slept for a day, she would eat 3 bowls of rice less. Why didn't she make up for it herself? Xiao Jinyan looked at Shen Shuwei and asked, "How many bowls of rice have you eaten in recent days?" Shen Shuwei stretched out a hand, spread his fingers, and said in a proud voice, 5 bowls of rice. A man named Wen Yi was so surprised when he heard about 5 bowls of rice. He subconsciously stared at Shen Shuwei for a few times. How could such a petite girl eat 5 bowls of rice? Xiao Jinyan was stunned for a moment. The last time she heard her say that she would make up for it in the future, she thought it was just a few extra bites in one meal. When she was ready, she just had 1 more bowl of rice in one meal. 5 bowls of rice? His voice was a little deep. "Why don't you make up for it all at once?" Shen Shuwei said a little embarrassedly, "I really want to make up for it all at once, but it's a pity that my ability is limited." Xiao Jinyan. Dr. Wen. Chengzi. Xiao Jinyan put down the teacup and had to say, "I used to eat several bowls of rice at one meal, but now I only eat several bowls of rice, and I can't even take 1 more bite." Although Xiao Jinyan is not a doctor, he also understands the harm of overeating to the body. The average woman only eats 1 or 2 bowls of rice at a meal. She eats 4 bowls of rice, which is much more than ordinary people. She still wants to eat 5 bowls of rice? Shen Shuwei nodded obediently. 4 bowls were all. She still wanted to have afternoon tea anyway. Xiao Jinyan nodded with satisfaction and said before leaving, "You have been practicing well these days." After everyone left, Chengzi couldn't help but say, "My little master, I have told you that you can't eat so many meals in one meal. You will gain weight easily. Shen Shuwei listened to Chengxi's motherly nagging, and she said nonchalantly, "You don't understand, His Highness likes fatter women." "How is this possible? How could His Highness like a fat woman?" Chengxi obviously didn't believe it. Shen Shuwei said very seriously, "Your Highness told me personally, is this true?" Shen Shuwei found a reason for himself to work openly and honestly. Chengxi, who was the first in the competition for favor, would never object to this reason. Chengxi was shocked. "It turns out that your Highness likes this mouth. Let me see if the young master can grow more meat." Shen Shuwei nodded vigorously, "That's it." The passing maid heard this and whispered to her companions while working, "Do you know what kind of women His Highness likes?" The companion stopped washing clothes and said with absolute certainty, "Of course she is a woman with both talent and beauty. She is not like us anyway." The maid looked proud as if she knew some big secret. "That's wrong, your Highness likes fat women." The companion was surprised and didn't believe it. "How is this possible? Your Highness is among the best among men and has an outstanding figure. How can he like fat women?" The maid said extremely seriously, "It's absolutely true. Shen Liangdi said it when passing by Hehuan Hall, and His Highness himself told Shen Liangdi. It can't be wrong." My companion was surprised for a long time and couldn't help but tell his best friend about it while eating. It has been passed down to 10 people and hundreds of people, and each version is more exaggerated than the last. His Highness personally told Shen Liangdi that he asked her to eat more to gain weight. How can this be false? In this way, everyone in the East Palace knew that His Highness liked fat women. Xinlan Hall. Chang Liangdi ate her lunch carefully. After eating a small bowl, she put down her bowl and chopsticks and picked up her handkerchief to wipe her mouth. Huaixiang couldn't help but remind her, "My young master, please stop losing weight. His Highness likes fat women." Chang Liangdi paused in wiping her mouth, then raised her eyes to look at Huaixiang. "Who did you listen to? Everyone in the East Palace knows now. His Highness said it himself. Shen Liangdi eats a lot of food now just to gain weight and keep her favor." Chang Liangdi found it hard not to believe what Huaixiang said about having a nose and eyes. "Think about Shen Liangdi again. Every time I see her, she eats. She eats. Women love beauty, how could they allow themselves to be so greedy? It turns out that His Highness deliberately ate more because he liked it." Huaixiang said again, "My lord, in front of you is concubine Yang, who has a graceful figure and is always favored. Some men like something a little fleshy, which feels good to the touch." Chang Liangdi was completely shaken by this, and naturally she was not willing to fall behind others. "Give me another bowl of rice, and I'll gain weight too." Huaixiang took the bowl and filled it with another bowl of rice. Chang Liangdi ate 2 bowls of rice in a row until she couldn't hold it anymore. Thinking of gaining weight, she ate another half bowl of rice until she couldn't hold it anymore. When Su Chenjui heard this, he was also surprised. Without saying anything, he asked Hua to cook for him. Su Chenjui, who had just finished lunch, forced himself to eat a bowl of rice. In the East Palace, both the masters and the maids began to gain weight, hoping that one day they would be favored by the prince and become a phoenix. Asterisk. Shen Shuwei had been recuperating for a few days. Xiao Jinyan was too busy to have time to eat or stay in Hehuan Palace, which made her feel very relaxed. One day is one day, and the boat will naturally straighten itself out when the time comes. Concubine Su and Tao Chenjui came to chat and play landlord when they had nothing to do, and then eat melon seeds together. After Concubine Su got familiar with someone, she would talk and ask questions whenever she had something to say. "I heard that His Highness asked you to gain weight, is that true?" Shen Shuwei nodded. "His Highness said I was too thin, I should gain some weight." Concubine Su looked up and down at Shen Shuwei. She was indeed very thin. No wonder women in the East Palace are gaining weight now, It turns out His Highness likes it. Should I also try to gain weight? Tao Chenjui looked worried, but fat clothes don't look good. I like thin, everything looks good, like Shen Liangdi. Shen Shuwei looked down at herself after hearing this. It seems not bad, although she has lost some weight, but in the past 10 months, she has also grown a lot of where she should grow. The body proportions are very good, still good. No, I'll give it a try. Concubine Su did what she said, waved goodbye, and went back to gain weight. Tao Chenjui was still a little hesitant. It's too difficult to choose between keeping in shape and His Highness's love. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 186. Today, the sky is clear and the temperature has risen by several degrees. In order to urge the gray rabbit to lose weight, Shen Shuwei has been letting it run and exercise its muscles. After running for 2 days, the gray rabbit got angry and quit, and ran away from home. Shen Shuwei searched for the gray rabbit for a long time but couldn't find it. Thinking that it had run away from home twice before, it must have run away, so she went out to look for it with her skirt lifted. After leaving the gate of Hehuan Hall, I saw the gray rabbit after a while. I finally found you. You are getting more and more courageous. You know you ran away from home, right? When the gray rabbit saw Shen Shuwei coming, his big black eyes turned twice, and then he ran away. The exercise in the past 2 days has some effect. The lazy gray rabbit, who has always been lazy and doesn't like to move, is running quite fast at this time, although not as fast as wild rabbits. Seeing the gray rabbit running away without looking back, Shen Shuwei put her hands on her hips and said harshly, "How dare you run? I'll catch you and fry you and steam you." As she said that, she picked up her skirt and chased after him. I don't know if the gray rabbit understood Shen Shuwei's threats, so it ran faster and ran out of the East Palace gate in a short while. Shen Shuwei had no choice but to run out. I don't know how long she ran before she heard someone calling her from behind. Shen Liangdi. Shen Shuwei thought the voice sounded familiar. She turned around with doubts and saw the little monk standing 5 meters away from her. He was wearing a gray hiking suit and standing against the light. His hairless head was shiny. With that cold and handsome face, he looked a bit like a Taoist monk. Seeing an acquaintance, Shen Shuwei smiled and asked, "Little monk, why are you in the palace?" Wuyutan walked in front of Shen Shuwei with even steps, clasped his hands together. "Master went to Beijing to give lectures, and I followed him." "Shen Liangdi, how are you?" Shen Shuwei let down the hem of her skirt to cover her embroidered shoes, raised her eyes and looked at the little monk. "How are you too, little monk?" Wuyutan smiled slightly. "Shen Liangdi, my name is Wuyutan, you can call me Wuyutan." Wuyutan, Shen Shuwei silently recited it, and smiled and said, "It's a nice name." Wuyutan said, "Shen Liangdi, I'm sorry to make you laugh." Shen Shuwei stared at Wuyutan's shiny forehead for a while. If it was someone else, she would still feel a little sorry that such a handsome guy shaved his head to become a monk. If it was Wuyutan, she felt that if he could be so handsome with a bald head, it meant he was really handsome. Wu Tan asked, "What was Shen Liangdi looking for just now?" "Looking for a little rabbit, and you? Why are you here?" Shen Shuwei remembered that the Buddhist temple was a little way from here. Could she have lost her way? Wu Tan said, "I have nothing to do. I can help Shen Liangdi find the rabbit." Shen Shuwei didn't know where the gray rabbit had gone. If Xiao Jinyan knew that she had lost the rabbit, he would definitely be angry. "Then I'll trouble you." "No trouble." 2 people were much faster than 1 person, and soon found the figure of the gray rabbit. Shen Shuwei tried to get closer to the gray rabbit while directing, "Wuyutan, you go over there and don't let it run away. Wu Tan cooperated very well. The two surrounded it slowly and drove the gray rabbit to the corner of the wall. Almost at the same time, both of them pounced on the rabbit, and one of them grabbed one of the rabbit's legs. Shen Shuwei held the rabbit's legs and breathed a sigh of relief, finally caught it. Wu Tan let go of the rabbit and let her hold it. He looked at the rabbit for a few times and found that it didn't look like a pet rabbit. Is this a wild rabbit? Yes, Your Highness picked it up during the autumn hunting. It was very cute when it was young. Shen Shuwei rubbed the rabbit's soft belly and smiled. It's not ugly now that it's fat, but it's too fat. Shen Liangdi raised it while Wu Tan took out a string of Buddhist beads from his sleeve pocket and handed it to Shen Shuwei. Shen Liangdi, this string of Buddhist beads has been blessed. I give it to you to ensure your safety. Shen Shuwei stared at the Buddhist beads in Wu Tan's hand. It was the first time she saw Buddhist beads that had been blessed. The beads were very small, and the brown material of the Buddhist beads looked like sandalwood. She could smell a faint sandalwood scent. Wu Tan reminded, Shen Liangdi, try it on to see if it fits. If it doesn't, I can modify it. Shen Shuwei hesitated. I heard that the blessed Buddhist beads are rare. You gave it to me, but you don't have it anymore, right? You should keep it for yourself. The Bodhisattva can't bless you 24 hours a day. Wu Tan asked doubtfully, what 24 hours? Shen Shuwei found that he was wrong and corrected, it's 12 hours. Don't worry, Shen Liangdi. I have planted the vegetable seeds you gave me last time. They have sprouted now. This string of Buddhist beads is to thank Shen Liangdi for giving me the vegetable seeds. Please accept it, Wu Tan said slowly, every word was sincere. Shen Shuwei thought for a while and nodded, then I will accept it. As he said that, he took the Buddhist beads from Wu Tan's hand and put them on his right hand, and pulled up his lotus pink sleeves. Wu Tan, the size of the Buddhist beads is just right. Wu Tan looked at Shen Shuwei's right wrist and found a cinnabar-colored mole on her wrist, the shape of which was a bit like peach blossoms. He looked up at Shen Shuwei, with a hint of expectation in his eyes. Shen Liangdi, is the mole on your hand natural? Shen Shuwei lowered her eyes to look at the mole on her wrist, and after thinking carefully, it seemed that the original owner had never had a mole tattooed. Natural. Shen Shuwei looked at Wu Tan in confusion. Is there anything wrong with this mole? Wu Tan stared at the mole for a while and shook his head. No problem, Shen Liangdi, don't worry. That's good. Shen Shuwei lowered her eyes and glanced at the mole on her wrist. She thought the peach-shaped mole was right next to the Buddhist beads and looked pretty good. Wu Tan stared at the peach-shaped mole for a long time and couldn't help asking, Shen Liangdi, where are you from? Shen Shangshu's residence. Shen Shuwei saw Wu Tan so nervous, thinking that Buddhism is more particular, and it is said that it can read people's faces, etc., which is comparable to Lord Lu. Could Wu Tan have figured out something? Wu Tan heard Shen Shangshu's residence, so Shen Liangdi is the daughter of Shen Shangshu? Shen Shuwei originally wanted to ask, but suddenly a cold and familiar voice came from behind. Shen Liangdi, what are you doing? She looked back and saw Xiao Jinyan standing behind her in a black court dress. She walked forward with the rabbit in her arms and bowed, Your Highness, I came out to find the rabbit. Xiao Jinyan lowered her eyes and glanced at the gray rabbit in her arms. Her eyes were very dark. When he came here just now, he saw Shen Shuwei and Wu Tan talking and laughing, and he didn't know what they were talking about. Wu Tan took a few steps forward and put his hands together, Your Highness. Xiao Jinyan retracted his gaze and looked at Wu Tan. His voice was very cold. Why is Wu Tan here? Wu Tan answered slowly, I saw the peach blossoms blooming here from afar, so I came to appreciate them. Xiao Jinyan said coldly, I didn't expect that monks would be so obsessed with the beauty of peach blossoms. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 187. Wu Tan lowered his eyes and said slowly, although I am a monk, I am attracted by peach blossoms because they are so beautiful that people forget that I am not a mortal. Xiao Jinyan looked at Wuyutan coldly. He didn't know if it was his illusion, but he somehow heard that Wuyutan had something to say. I didn't expect Wuyutan to be so eloquent. Shen Shuwei said cautiously, Wuyutan helped me find the rabbit. Xiao Jinyan looked at Shen Shuwei with phoenix eyes and said in a deep voice, did I ask you? Shen Shuwei lowered her eyes and looked at the little rabbit. The two of them stared at each other, inexplicably angry. Wuyutan lowered his eyes and said nothing. Xiao Jinyan said, why don't you go back with me? After speaking, he looked at Wuyutan thoughtfully, and then left first. Shen Shuwei looked at Wuyutan, waved at him, and followed with the rabbit in his arms. Wu Tan looked up at Shen Shuwei's back as she left until she disappeared at the corner of the corridor. They looked similar, even the mole on their wrists was the same. Could it be her? On the way back, Shen Shuwei looked up and secretly glanced at Xiao Jinyan, only to see that he had a gloomy face and didn't know what he was angry about. Until they walked into the East Palace and were about to reach the door of the Hehuan Palace, Xiao Jinyan spoke, what were you and Wu Tan talking about just now? Shen Shuwei told the truth, Your Highness, he helped me catch rabbits and gave me a string of blessed Buddhist beads to bless me, and then. Xiao Jinyan frowned, what Buddhist beads? This one. Shen Shuwei stretched out her hand and rolled up her sleeves to reveal a white and slender wrist. A string of cinnabar-colored Buddhist beads was quietly worn on it, which looked very beautiful. A very common string of Buddhist beads, with some differences in details. Xiao Jinyan coldly spat out 3 words, it's really ugly. Ugly, Shen Shuwei raised her hand, took a closer look, and said, it's pretty good. Xiao Jinyan said with a sullen face, as my concubine, how can you wear something given by another man? Shen Shuwei explained, Wuyutan is a monk. Xiao Jinyan asked back, a monk is not a man. Shen Shuwei always felt that Xiao Jinyan was scolding Wuyutan for not being a man. That's not what I meant. I'll take it off. Shen Shuwei took off the Buddhist beads on her wrist and put them in her sleeve pocket. These are the Buddhist beads that have been blessed and can ensure safety. It was also Wuyutan's heartfelt gift. The only thing a monk can show off is probably the Buddhist beads. Xiao Jinyan showed a satisfied look when he saw this, then what? What did you talk about? After Shen Shuwei put away the Buddhist beads, she looked up at Xiao Jinyan and said, nothing to talk about, I'm just curious about the mole on my wrist. Xiao Jinyan asked, what mole? Shen Shuwei stretched out her right hand, rolled up her sleeves, and showed the mole to Xiao Jinyan, Your Highness, it's this mole. Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes to look at the part of her wrist that was exposed. There was a red bean-sized mole on the inside of her wrist. He stretched out his hand, held her hand and brought it to his face, carefully looking at the mole, and found that it was shaped like a peach blossom, which was very conspicuous on her fair skin. He had never noticed this mole before. Xiao Jinyan raised her eyes to look at Shen Shuwei, with a hint of anger in her voice, how can you show your wrist to others? Shen Shuwei explained, I didn't show it to others. Wu Tan was afraid that the Buddhist beads would not fit properly, so he asked me to try it first. When I wore the Buddhist beads, I accidentally found it. She wanted to complain about the ancient feudal ideas, but unfortunately, she was in ancient times and couldn't be like modern times. Xiao Jinyan let go of her hand, thinking that he was too busy recently and didn't know how she was doing recently. Have you felt uncomfortable recently? Shen Shuwei shook her head, I'm fine. Xiao Jinyan had been worried that she would have any sequelae because of the witchcraft, so he felt much more at ease now. That's good. If you feel uncomfortable, please ask the imperial physician immediately. Shen Shuwei replied, I know. Xiao Jinyan said again, I'm a little busy these days. I'll go to Hehuan Palace for dinner in 2 days. Shen Shuwei said, Your Highness's official business is the most important. It's fine for me to eat alone. Shen Shuwei felt that eating might be a top priority for herself, but for Xiao Jinyan, it was secondary. Xiao Jinyan, really? Shen Shuwei nodded vigorously, thinking in her heart, you are busy, don't worry about me. Xiao Jinyan stared at Shen Shuwei for a long time, turned and left. Shen Shuwei looked at Xiao Jinyan's back as he left, and felt that he seemed to be angry again. A man's heart is as deep as the sea, and it's true. Xiao Jinyan went back to the palace with a gloomy face. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that Wu Tan's six senses were not pure. A monk actually liked to appreciate peach blossoms. Peach blossoms. He frowned. Su Chenjui had been gaining weight for many days and finally made some progress. He couldn't wait to go to the prince's bedroom to see his highness. Just halfway through, he saw Xiao Jinyan coming towards him. She made sure that she was well-mannered, then walked over with small steps and bowed, Your Highness, may you be blessed with good health. Xiao Jinyan didn't recognize the woman who saluted him at first glance, and he said lightly, Get up. Thank you, Your Highness. Su Chenjui stood up happily and looked at Xiao Jinyan shyly, Your Highness, I have prepared some snacks for you to try. Xiao Jinyan looked at it for a few times but still didn't recognize who it was. He didn't remember there was such a fat woman in the East Palace. He turned his head to look at Lu 11. Lu 11 was worthy of being someone who had followed Xiao Jinyan for many years. He immediately understood the meaning of it with one look. He leaned in and whispered, Your Highness, this is Su Chenjui. Su Chenjui? Xiao Jinyan didn't care about the women in the East Palace, and he didn't remember her because she had grown so fat. After Lu 11's reminder, Xiao Jinyan recognized her from her eyebrows and eyes. I still have to go to the imperial study, so you can take the wine and food back. Xiao Jinyan was about to leave after saying that. Su Chenjui was a little unwilling, and when Xiao Jinyan passed by, he pretended to fall down and wanted to fall into his arms. Ah, Su Chenjui pretended to exclaim. Xiao Jinyan saw Su Chenjui's body approaching from the corner of his eyes, and dodged without making a sound. With a bang, Su Chenjui fell heavily to the ground. Why are you so careless? Come on, help Su Chenjui back and ask the imperial doctor to take a look. After Xiao Jinyan said that, he left without looking back. Su Chenjui gained 10 pounds, and after this fall, he was directly bedridden for half a month. Asterisk. Xiao Jinyan was busy for 2 days, and came to the Hehuan Palace when he had time. At this time, it was 3/4 past midnight. Shen Shuwei was sitting on the couch after taking a bath, shaking her feet, stroking Swichuan with one hand, and reading a romance novel with the other hand. Swichuan noticed someone coming in, and pricked up his ears and looked over. Since the two of them lived next door, Swichuan has become a frequent visitor to the Hehuan Palace. Shen Shuwei was wearing pajamas, with 2 slender arms exposed, and the trouser legs of the pajamas were just above the knees, revealing 2 beautiful jade feet. This was the scene that Xiao Jinyan saw when he came in, and he immediately felt a little dry in the mouth. He coughed lightly, Xiaoju. Good night, my dears. Acting cute and asking for monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 188. The familiar voice forced Shen Shuwei, who was wandering in the romance novel, out of the room. Shen Shuwei raised her head and saw Xiao Jinyan walking towards him. She was a little surprised that he would come at this time. It was already past dinner time. She hurriedly put down her book and stood up to greet him, but was stopped by Xiao Jinyan. No need to bow. Shen Shuwei paused in throwing the cat. Xiao Jinyan didn't let her bow. She was too lazy to move, so she sat down obediently with Swichuan in her arms. When Xiao Jinyan came closer, she asked, Your Highness, are you not busy? I just finished my work and came to see you. Xiao Jinyan sat down on the couch. Shen Shuwei breathed a sigh of relief. It turned out that he just came to see her, not to sleep with her. Xiao Jinyan heard what she said in her heart. He was too busy during this period and almost forgot about sleeping with her. He remembered it after she mentioned it. He said before that he would sleep with her after she recovered. Now she has recovered well, and it's time. He said that he didn't want to wait that time, and he really didn't want to wait. Xiao Jinyan first asked someone to prepare hot water, and then asked Chengzi to make a cup of fresh tea. Chengzi was efficient, and soon he came in with a teacup, put it on the low table, and then left respectfully. Xiao Jinyan drank slowly. Shen Chuwei was stroking a snowball, watching Xiao Jinyan drinking tea. She couldn't help but remind him, "Your Highness, drinking tea at night affects your sleep." Xiao Jinyan looked up at Shen Chuwei and said indifferently, "I plan to sleep later tonight." "Your Highness, do you still have to work after taking a bath?" Shen Chuwei couldn't help but sigh, "The prince is too hard, working overtime every day." Xiao Jinyan. "He can't get through the office now." Shen Chuwei is young and has no energy to work overtime, nor does she have the energy to study hard, but she is a doctor and knows that working overtime is the most harmful to the body, liver, and eyes. There may be a risk of baldness. Looking at Xiao Jinyan's handsome face, it is impossible to imagine what he would look like with a bald head. Shen Chuwei thought for a while, put down the snowball, got off the bed, walked to the cabinet in slippers, opened the cabinet door and searched. Xiao Jinyan paused while drinking tea, looked up at Shen Chuwei. She was squatting on the ground, her arms raised, causing her clothes to rise, revealing a large section of her white waist. His Adam's apple rolled up and down. "What are you looking for?" Shen Chuwei said without raising her head, "Looking for the eye-clearing and heat-removing tea." Found it. Shen Chuwei took out a bag of tea from the cabinet and stood up and walked over. She put the tea on the low table and said to Xiao Jinyan, "Your Highness, this is the eye-clearing and heat-removing tea, which is most suitable for working overtime and staying up late." Xiao Jinyan did stay up late these days, and it was rare for someone to carefully prepare the eye-clearing and heat-removing tea for him. Xiao Ju is thoughtful. "This is what I should do." Shen Chuwei sat back on the couch again, and before she could pick up the snowball came over with lazy steps, trying to let Shen Chuwei continue to stroke it. Xiao Jinyan saw Sichuan's actions and frowned. Chengzi came in to report, "Your Highness, the hot water is ready." Xiao Jinyan put down the teacup, "I'll go take a bath first." Shen Chuwei didn't care and continued to play with cats and read novels to kill time. The plot she was reading at this time was that the male protagonist tried his best to pursue the female protagonist, and used all the tricks to pursue girls, but all ended in failure. In the end, he simply moved to the rental house next to the female protagonist. On this day, he knocked on the female protagonist's door under the pretext that the shower was broken. The female protagonist saw that it was her boss, who was very strict with her in the company during the day. Now that the boss took the initiative to ask for help, she must build a good relationship with the boss. Shen Chuwei clicked her tongue twice. The male protagonist was too black-bellied. When she was reading the exciting story, a slender body pressed down in front of her. The candlelight at night was not as bright as the modern lights. Under such pressure, the words on the book were not very clear. She looked up and saw Xiao Jinyan's twinkling eyes staring at her. He had just finished bathing and there was a faint cold scent of green bamboo on his body, which was very pleasant. "What are you reading?" So absorbed, Xiao Jinyan came out of the bath and saw Shen Chuwei staring at the book, and she didn't even notice him coming over. How could Shen Chuwei dare to say that she was reading a modern romance novel? If Xiao Jinyan read that the hero and heroine in the book were not married, and they held hands, kissed, hugged, and went to bed, Xiao Jinyan would probably be very angry because of his futile thinking. Maybe he would even scold her for having a head full of pornographic garbage and reading such an indecent book. She closed the book and smiled guiltily. "It's ancient poetry, and I am working hard to learn it." Really, Xiao Jinyan looked at the book in her hand, which was very different from the books he had seen before, and reached out to take it. Let me see what kind of ancient poetry it is. How could Shen Shuwei let Xiao Jinyan see the content of the book? She hurriedly put the romance novel behind her, trying to hide it. Xiao Jinyan's target was the book, and when Shen Shuwei hit it, he subconsciously followed it, and his body pressed down a little more, shortening the distance between them. The faint peach blossom fragrance surrounded the tip of the nose, lingering for a long time, and became more intense. Perhaps she was thinking about sleeping with him, and her usual restraint was gone. Shen Shuwei was afraid that Xiao Jinyan would get the romance novel, so she grabbed Xiao Jinyan's arm and tried to divert his attention. Your Highness, you are so busy and have to get up early tomorrow, so go to bed early. Shen Shuwei didn't know that Xiao Jinyan didn't need to divert his attention at all at this time, because his attention was always on her. The girl had bright eyes and white teeth, her lips were red without any blemish, and her skin was whiter than snow and jade. Xiao Jinyan's eyes darkened. Xiao Ju is right. Shen Shuwei breathed a sigh of relief, but before she could finish her breath, she was held horizontally by Xiao Jinyan. Instinctively, she stretched out her arms to hug Xiao Jinyan's neck to keep her balance. Xiao Jinyan held her and strode to the bed. He bent down and laid her flat on the bed, and turned around to put down the bed curtains one by one. The bed curtains had 2 layers, both of which were somewhat transparent gauze. Even so, the light in the bed was much dimmer. There were 2 lamps at the head of the bed, which were not used at ordinary times. Today, Xiao Jinyan turned them on. Shen Shuwei looked up at Xiao Jinyan's actions in confusion. Your Highness, why do you light the lamp after resting? You will know later. Xiao Jinyan continued to light the lamp. Xiao Jinyan didn't say anything, and Shen Shuwei was even more confused. After the 2 lamps were turned on, the bed became much brighter. Although it was not comparable to modern lamps, it was better. Xiao Jinyan sat back on the bed and looked down at Shen Shuwei. The faint light shone on her snow-white skin, with a faint blush. Shen Shuwei waited for a while, but did not see Xiao Jinyan get on the bed. She called out in confusion, Your Highness. Xiao Jinyan stared at her for a long time, lifted the quilt and got on the bed, looking at her sideways. No one would believe it if I said it, but I was actually a little nervous at this moment. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 189. The ambiguous atmosphere lingered between the 2 of them silently. Shen Shuwei found that Xiao Jinyan was still staring at her, and her face was inexplicably hot. What does he want to do if he doesn't sleep? Want to talk all night long? But she wants to sleep. Xiao Jinyan's slender fingers stretched to her chin, and the fingertips rubbed the edge of her lips. The touch was soft, but the hand could not effectively experience the real touch. Shen Shuwei suddenly felt alarmed. Xiao Jinyan did this action 2 or 3 times and ended up kissing her. Could it be that he wanted to kiss her this time? Thinking of this possibility, Shen Shuwei decided to take the initiative to relieve her own crisis. She supported herself on the bed and slowly raised her body, and put her hand on Xiao Jinyan's chest. She originally wanted to put her hand on his right shoulder, but her arm was not long enough, so she could only press it on his chest. Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and looked at the hand on his chest, holding his breath, watching her approach little by little, with a little caution. Shen Shuwei leaned in and kissed his handsome cheek. She thought she would never need a good night kiss in her life, but she didn't expect to use it tonight. She could sleep now. Before she could breathe a sigh of relief, a big hand pressed her head back, pushing her back and blocking her accurately. The slightly cool touch made her know that she was kissing Xiao Jinyan's lips. She widened her eyes, and the hand on his chest tightly grasped his clothes, as if trying to restrain herself from pushing him off the bed. Although Xiao Jinyan knew Kung Fu, she was strong, so it was still possible to push him off the bed. But when she thought of the experience of kicking him last time, she was scared. Xiao Jinyan's restrained and forbearing kiss was gentler than ever, with careful comfort. As they kissed, Shen Shuwei found that she had not known when she lay down. Looking at the man on her body, she felt that there was a hand that was very restless. She would be stupid if she didn't know what he wanted to do. So now she was serving him in bed? Why didn't Xiao Jinyan tell her in advance so that she could be prepared? Her limbs were weak and the feeling of suffocation surged up again, making her feel like she would die in the next second. Fortunately, he let her go at this time. She took a deep breath of fresh air. "Your Highness." Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and looked at the blurred eyes of the girl under him, and kissed her again. "Shen Shuwei. Still coming?" She instinctively stretched out her arms against his chest, trying to stop him from getting close. In Xiao Jinyan's eyes, it was nervous and scared. He whispered hoarsely in her ear, "Xiaoju, don't be afraid." Shen Shuwei said, "Is this a problem of fear?" She just couldn't accept sharing a husband with them. As long as she didn't sleep with him, it didn't matter what happened, it was all superficial anyway. After sleeping with him, the taste changed immediately. Xiao Jinyan kissed the corner of her lips. "Xiaoju." Shen Shuwei looked at Xiao Jinyan and saw that he was determined not to stop until the end. She couldn't really do anything to Xiao Jinyan. There is a saying that goes, when you can't resist, just enjoy it. Fortunately, Xiao Jinyan's appearance is 1 in a million handsome, and his figure seems to be good, so he should not be bad in that aspect. Shen Shuwei comforted herself in this way. Although she was thinking of a bunch of yellow garbage, at least she comforted herself. Only a second later, Shen Shuwei felt something was wrong. She stretched out her hand in confusion, only to find that she had read the romance novel in vain, and she didn't know. Xiao Jinyan groaned, "Xiaoju." Shen Shuwei blushed, she really didn't mean it. At this time, a shrill voice came in inappropriately, "Your Highness, something happened." Xiao Jinyan paused, raised his head and looked in the direction of the door. Shen Shuwei also looked in the direction of the door in confusion. Lu 11's voice came again, "Your Highness, something happened." Lu 11 has been with him for so many years, and there is nothing important, so he won't knock on the door in the middle of the night to disturb him. Xiao Jinyan retracted his gaze and looked at Shen Shuwei. Anyone who was interrupted in the middle of the way would be unhappy. He lifted the bed curtain and began to put on his clothes. Shen Shuwei sat up, holding the bed curtain with both hands, poked her head out, and stared at Xiao Jinyan. She suddenly thought of a scene in a romance novel, which was exactly the same as their current situation, and the male protagonist's face was so stinky. Xiao Jinyan was wearing clothes and found Shen Shuwei's head poking out. Because he was in a hurry to go out, he didn't notice that she was trying to hold back her smile. "I'll be back soon." After saying that, he tied his waist belt and went out. Shen Shuwei sat on the bed and watched Xiao Jinyan go out and close the door. She retracted her head and closed the bed curtain. She looked down and saw that the buttons of her pajamas had been unbuttoned by Xiao Jinyan, revealing the lotus pink belly band inside. She was entangled whether to tie it up, and thought that Xiao Jinyan said he would be back soon, which meant that he would continue when he came back. She simply ignored it, lay down again, and looked at the top of the bed. After Xiao Jinyan came out, he saw Lu 11 with a sullen face and said, "You'd better have something important to say." Lu 11 had followed Xiao Jinyan for so many years, and he knew he was very unhappy at the moment when he heard his tone. He secretly wiped the cold sweat. "Your Highness, Chang Liangdi suddenly fainted, the situation is unclear, and the queen is on the way." Chang Liangdi is the only daughter of General Chang. If something happens to her, General Chang will be very sad, and the consequences of being distracted on the battlefield will only be more serious. Xiao Jinyan frowned. Why did she faint? Lu 11 said, I don't know. When they arrived at Zinlan Palace, the imperial doctor was already treating Chang Liangdi. Xiao Jinyan walked to the bedside, lowered his eyes and glanced at Chang Liangdi. Seeing that her face was pale and she was much rounder than before, he asked the imperial physician, what happened to Chang Liangdi? The imperial physician said respectfully, Your Highness, Chang Liangdi has had indigestion recently due to the food she ate, and her body couldn't bear it and caused her to faint. Chang Liangdi has always eaten less, how could she have food? Xiao Jinyan looked coldly at Huaixiang on the side, how do you serve your master? Tell the truth. Huaixiang was frightened and knelt on the ground, telling the truth one by one, Your Highness, the young master has been eating 2 more bowls of food at each meal in order to gain weight recently, and then went to sleep after eating. Today is as usual, but I didn't expect to faint suddenly. Xiao Jinyan frowned, why would Chang Liangdi suddenly want to gain weight? Because I heard that your highness likes fat women, the young master wants to gain weight, Huaixiang said tremblingly. Xiao Jinyan listened, as if he heard a joke, stupid to the extreme. It's just nonsense. The queen also rushed over at this time and heard the prince's words. She glanced at Huaixiang who was kneeling on the ground in confusion and asked the prince, what's wrong with Chang Liangdi? Xiao Jinyan stepped forward to greet, replying to the queen mother, Chang Liangdi is unwell because of excessive drinking. The queen frowned when she heard about the excessive drinking, what's going on? Xiao Jinyan explained the reason. After listening, the queen also thought it was nonsense. What she didn't understand was, why did the prince suddenly like fat women? Good night, my dears. Begging for monthly tickets and recommendation tickets by acting cute. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 190. Not to mention that the queen didn't understand, even Xiao Jinyan himself didn't understand. When did he say that he liked fat girls? He wouldn't be so bored as to say these things to the women in the East Palace. He really couldn't understand the brain circuits of those women. After returning to my mother, I don't know where this rumor came from. Why did Chang Liangdi believe such rumors? The queen was angry and distressed. She looked at Chang Liangdi on the bed and found that she was much rounder and had a lot of flesh on her cheeks. She originally had single eyelids, which made her eyes look smaller. I used to have such a good figure, why can't I think about gaining weight? My beautiful eyes are almost gone. Xiao Jinyan glanced at Chang Liangdi. It was indeed what the queen said. There was too much flesh on her face and it was not good looking. Only Xiao Jinyan could not help but laugh after hearing the queen's words, but Shen Shuwei would have endured a stomachache by now. After diagnosis and treatment, the imperial doctor used silver needles to wake up Chang Liangdi. When the queen saw that Chang Liangdi was awake, she sat down on the bed and held her hand to comfort her. Lan'er, why are you so confused? When Chang Liangdi saw the queen and Xiao Jinyan coming, she couldn't help but feel a little proud. Even though I was not favored by Shen Shuwei, when I fell ill, the crown prince and the queen came. Can Shen Shuwei do it? This is the difference between strength and background. Xiao Jinyan frowned when he heard this. Although Chang Liangdi was arrogant and proud in her heart, this was indeed the truth. The inner courtyard of the palace and the court were inextricably linked. Shen Shuwei has no identity or background. If he insists on letting his father make her the crown princess, he may face many obstacles. Thinking of this, Xiao Jinyan frowned. Chang Liangdi said weakly, Aunt, I'm sorry for making you worry. I'm not worried about your health. Don't do such a stupid thing next time. No matter what you do, the prince will like you, the queen comforted you. After hearing this, Chang Liangdi raised her head and looked at Xiao Jinyan, her eyes full of expectation. Xiao Jinyan directly ignored the look she looked over. Even if you are a fairy descending to earth, I will not like you. The imperial doctor prescribed some medicine and then withdrew. Seeing that Chang Liangdi was awake, the queen gave some instructions and planned to return to Fenji Palace. Xiao Jinyan was also about to return to Huandian because Shen Shuwei was still waiting for him. Before he could take a step forward, the queen mother ordered, "Prince, please stay and spend more time with Lan'er." Xiao Jinyan felt a little ridiculous and helpless when he heard this. If he stayed with Chang Liangdi, would Chang Liangdi be in good health? So what else does the imperial doctor do? He would have nodded in agreement before, but now, he wants to refuse. "Mother, Shen Liangdi is still waiting for me." When the queen heard about Shen Liangdi, she was stunned for a moment. It was then that she knew that the prince came from Shen Shuwei, which also meant that the two had reconciled. "Shen Liangdi is not a weakling, so she will understand you." Xiao Jinyan pursed her lips, thinking that Shen Shuwei was always figuring out the plot every day. If he knew that he was staying in Zinlan Hall, he might be thinking about some messy plot. "I understand, I respectfully send my mother off to you." The queen then left the Zinlan Palace with satisfaction. After everyone left, only Xiao Jinyan and Chang Liangdi were left in the room. Chang Liangdi looked at Xiao Jinyan, who was rarely left behind, and felt a little excited. However, she felt weak all over and her stomach felt very uncomfortable. If she is well, tonight is a good opportunity to sleep with her. Xiao Jinyan sat by the bed for a while and then said, "It's getting late. You should rest early. I will come to see you another day." After saying that, he stood up and left Zinlan Palace in large strides. Chang Liangdi originally wanted to ask someone to stay, but she thought that in her current situation, it would be useless to stay if she could not sleep with him. It would be better to leave a considerate impression to His Highness. Seeing that His Highness had left, Huaixiang felt a little resentful and said, "My lord, you are already like this, and His Highness is still leaving. He is probably going to Hehuan Palace. Shen Liangdi doesn't know what kind of ecstasy soup was poured into His Highness." Chang Liangdi coughed lightly, naturally resentful in her heart. Xiao Jinyan did not take herself to heart, but placed a nothing on her heart. "My little master, I guess it's because Shen Liangdi is so good in bed that His Highness is so obsessed with her. Fortunately, Shen Liangdi has a weak stomach and doesn't pose any real threat to my little master." Huaixiang's words awakened Chang Liangdi. Shen Liangdi had been sleeping with her many times, but she was not in a good mood, and she was not qualified to compete with herself. With the support of her aunt and her maternal family, the position of crown princess will be hers sooner or later. But what Chang Liangdi didn't know was that Shen Shuwei not only had a good belly, but also gave birth to a pair of twins, which made the queen extremely happy. The royal family had never had twins, let alone twins, and the emperor was overjoyed. Asterisk. Xiao Jinyan hurried back to Hehuan Hall. Chengzi was still guarding the door. When she saw Xiao Jinyan coming back, she opened the door. Xiao Jinyan walked straight in, and Chengzi closed the door again. Xiao Jinyan pushed open the door to the back room. It was quiet inside, except for the occasional faint sound of candlelight. He came to the bed and took off his clothes first. After taking off his clothes, he opened the bed curtain and saw the person on the bed sleeping soundly with the quilt in his arms. Considering her sleepy nature, it is normal for her to fall asleep. Xiao Jinyan sat down on the bed, put down the bed curtains, and then lay on the bed. He pulled out the quilt from Shen Shuwei's arms and covered himself. Shen Shuwei was used to sleeping with things in her arms. Now the quilt in her arms was gone. Xiao Jinyan happened to be leaning over, so she stretched out her arms and put her arms into her arms. Lian Tui also put her arms on Xiao Jinyan's legs, with her eyes closed the whole time. Xiao Jinyan's eyes fell on the arm, and he could clearly feel the softness, which was the same as the touch just now. The leg below was also restless, rubbing his leg intentionally or unintentionally. He suddenly felt a little dry in the mouth. Xiaoju. Shen Shuwei was sleeping soundly and would not be easily awakened. Xiao Jinyan was a little helpless, but there was nothing he could do. He did not sleep well that night. Shen Shuwei was awakened early in the morning, and she opened her eyes suddenly. It's over. Xiao Jinyan had just put on his clothes and heard Shen Shuwei's voice, so he lifted the bed curtain and saw that he was awake. What's wrong? Shen Shuwei thought Xiao Jinyan had left, and a dark head suddenly stretched out from the bed curtain, scaring her. Thinking of what happened last night, her face turned red. Your Highness, I fell asleep while waiting last night. No problem. Xiao Jinyan saw her slightly red cheeks and looked at her pajamas. The buttons were not fastened and it was open at this time. Shen Shuwei looked down along Xiao Jinyan's line of sight and saw that her pajamas were still open, and the lotus pink belly band was exposed in front of Xiao Jinyan. Xiao Jinyan said he would go and come back last night, so she thought he would come back to continue, so she was too lazy to tie it. Who knew she fell asleep? Xiao Jinyan praised, pink, it looks good. Shen Shuwei. I saw it yesterday and even touched it.